What is the human's race? Find out on this episode of Pushback.
Go, Johnny, go, go. Go, Johnny, go, go. Go, Johnny, go, go.
If you're concerned about the direction our culture is heading, then maybe it's time to push back. Hello everyone, I'm Dr. Johnny, and this is another episode of Pushback. It is a great pleasure to come to you each and every week and trying to give you real life, right out of the headline type information that we can talk about from a Christian perspective, but also a kingdom perspective, and how that we can impact even the kingdom of this world by being ambassadors of the kingdom of heaven. That's what we do here. And I want to give you language and ways about talking about real relevant issues that are happening in this world right now. And I want to delve into a deep cultural issue that I have talked about many times on this podcast. But I assured you before, and I will continue to keep this promise, that I want to keep going back to these issues about life and about abortion. It's number one on my list. Shortly thereafter is this issue about race, because I believe that there is such an obvious narrative that is being missed on both of these topics. And I want to go back to the race issue today because I believe it is just so important that we as people of the kingdom have the vocabulary, have the verbiage to speak to the world with compassion, with love, with honor, but also real solutions. He doesn't put us on this earth to go into the fetal position. He doesn't put us on this earth to bob down the river of culture and just take it wherever it's going to take us. No, he calls us to push back, to find truth and to stand on that truth no matter where the current is going or pushing. So there was my passionate opening for you, because I'm so passionate about this. And if you've listened to my podcast over these last 4 seasons, I'm coming close to the end of season number 4. You know that I am passionate about culture and passionate about not only just succumbing to culture, but setting the culture. So I have been asking the question to myself, even having discussions with colleagues and different people, why there is such resistance to what we call color blindness. I'm actually colorblind, interestingly, more color deficient than colorblind. There's certain colors I can't tell apart quite as well. It runs in the men of my family. But so it's interesting that I'm bringing this message of color blindness. And there is such a resistance. When I talk about sides, I sort of shudder. But when we talk about racial divide, the different races pitting themselves against each other, and for whatever reason, and I can't quite figure it out, although I'm starting to, I'm trying to figure out the reason why there is such resistance to pursuing colorblindness as an end game. And it's been explained to me that the danger of colorblindness, quote unquote danger, is that we ignore the fact, or we look past the decades of injustice, the centuries of injustice that have happened from one race towards another. So if we just put up the flag of colorblindness, then we are ignoring the injustices that have happened through the generations. And so I do have compassion for that, and I get that. But it's interesting because what we have to always dig down is, what is the root? What is the root of racism? What is the inherent problem? And like so many problems that affect human society and human life, the problem is a lie. It's a lie. And when we believe a lie, there is absolutely no good fruit that could ever grow from a lie. And so that's what we're seeing. And I believe that's also the frustration that we are seeing in this world today, because we are talking about the misapplying of a lie. So this is a double whammy. This is a twofold issue. We have a lie that is believed as truth, and then we have the misapplication of that lie. Now, I could spend the whole podcast just making list after list of the misapplications of a lie and giving many examples. But sitting specifically on the race issue, we can start with things like the Crusades, for instance. The Crusades somehow had it was based on a lie that the Islamic people of the Middle East were a threat to Christianity. And because of that, we can misapply that truth, that lie that's believed as a truth, and justify, then we can misapply that to say we should form an army of vigilantes to go and wipe them out in the name of God. It's a misapplication. Obviously, we can talk about the Holocaust. There was a racial issue at the very core, which was that the Aryan race was superior to all races. We can thank Charles Darwin for that, for perpetuating that lie, and that the Aryan race was more evolved and more superior. The Jews were rats that needed to be exterminated. And so they applied the lie to a society that actually eventually did succumb to the lie and misapplied it by justifying killing millions of Jews. It's a misapplication of a lie. Slavery would be the other obvious example of which our country is still feeling the reverberations of the injustice of the misapplication of a lie. Now you might say, Dr. Johnny, you're making this too simple. Like misapplying something slavery is much worse than just a misapplication or a misunderstanding. And that's exactly what I'm saying, is that you're actually misapplying a lie. Misapplication, the definition is to use something for the wrong purpose or in the wrong way. Well, if we believe the lie that white people are superior to black people and black people are savages that simply need to be controlled, and we're doing them a favor by introducing them to church and having them serve us, and we feed them every day, we can justify that and say, okay, because of that, slavery must be then okay. Because we are superior and they are inferior, we have then the moral justice to actually enslave them. See, there's a lie that's inherent in the problem, and then we misapply the lie. Now, you could argue that these are less serious, or they're as serious because they're continued misapplications. But you could talk about Jim Crow laws and redlining, and you could go to the other direction and talk about affirmative action, or even reparations, which is the topic of today. Reparation is the making of amends for a wrong one has done by paying money or to otherwise helping those who have been wronged. And so we are still, through a reparation, we're still misapplying a lie, which is based on my skin color and race, and because I have been wronged, now you, because of your skin color and your race, have to pay up to make it even. But inherent in the lie is that there are races, that there are factions based on our skin color. Now you may say, well, how can you deny that there are factions? They are human factions that are created by humans. They aren't factions created by God. They aren't factions created by science. They aren't factions that we actually see in our objective mind and truth, and it doesn't actually line up with common sense. It's a lie that has been propagated through an evolutionary lie, which has certainly propagated this. It's very inconvenient and it's very uncomfortable for us to talk about, but evolution has created factions that tell us and teach us, Charles Darwin taught this directly, teach us that there are factions, that there are races that are more highly evolved than others. And when the lower evolved races are exterminated, it's all part of normal life. Survival of the fittest. It's part of genetic shuffling. It's a part of eliminating the inferior so that the superior can rise. This is the tenet of the lie that has been given to us and is taught in our science classes every single day. And we don't say a word. And we run around in the streets and we wave flags about racism, not understanding that at the root cause of this is a lie that we have believed as a society. And it's been believed not only in America and not only since Darwin, it's been believed since the very beginning of time. And it's a lie appropriated by the liar. It's a wonderful tactic to bring division among people. You've heard me talk about this many times before. What is race? Where did the term race even came from? I tried to research this. Some said in the 1500s, some said in the 1700s. It's a relatively modern term when you talk about the history of the world. And it kills me because we know that there has been what's called a human genome project. This is a scientific endeavor to map the human genomic structure. And they fully expected to find 3 to 5 different race classes based on genetics. And guess what they found? That there's only one race, the human race, which implies itself isn't even true because there can't just be one race. It implies that there are no races. So when we take the word race and we apply it to our human condition, it's actually based upon a lie. Science has proven it. The Bible has proven it. The Bible shows that we are all descendants of Adam and Eve, subsequently all descendants of Noah after the flood. The Bible says that we are one blood. The Bible says that we are all descendants. We are all family from common ancestors from the Garden of Eden. That's what the Bible says. That's what the science says. This is a lie that's propagated. It says in science that all races share 99.99+% of the same genetic materials, which means, and this just kills me, that the division of race is largely subjective. I looked up the word subjective. Subjective means existing in the mind, belonging to the thinking subject rather than the object of thought. Which means that we as the human race has created this ourselves. This is a self-propagating problem. That's why I entitled this podcast, The Humans Race. We own this. We own this lie. It's not true. It's not scientifically true. It's not biblically true. None of it is true. And yet we propagate it and we continue to put it forward. It was interesting. I was reading something that says, why is it called the human race and not species? Why aren't there different species? Why isn't there a black species and a white species? That's how other animalistic terms are used. And this is extremely sobering. It said, this is because modern humans haven't been around long enough to evolve into different subspecies. And we've always moved and mated and mixed our genes. Beneath the skin, we are one of the most genetically similar of all species. It's interesting and super scary because what this is basically saying and what we are believing is that if we just are around long enough, guess what? We are going to evolve into different subspecies, some more highly evolved than others. Hey, everyone listening, our kids aren't stupid. They're sitting in science class and they're telling them about evolving species. And they're thinking to themselves, okay, so if we have different races, we have different subspecies in the human race, then some must be better than others. Some must be more evolved than others. This is what Charles Darwin taught, and this is what has been propagated through the human condition over the last hundreds of years. See, we have created this race. This is the humans' race. And it's based on a lie, and we own it. And then it's based on the misapplication of the lie. So they are saying that we are all in a race. That's what we're saying. We're in a race. And the whites have fixed the race so that they always win. Now, that might be true. I'm not even arguing that point. But let's bring the metaphor forward. So what we are saying is that there are different lanes. Now introducing lane number 1, the whites. In lane number 2, the blacks. Lane number 3, the Hispanics, and so on and so on. And we divide ourselves up into these races who are all running a race, all looking to win. This is the race that we've set up. And it's not good enough to all start on the same line to make the race even. That's called equality. So we try to handicap it. And that is the awkward song and dance in which we live right now. We're trying to handicap it. So the whites in lane 1 have to run barefoot. The blacks get to wear shoes and start 20 feet ahead. The Asians 10 feet ahead. And we try to cap it. We try to handicap it based on past history and injustices. And so we're trying to make this race so that everybody wins at the same time. But here is the punchline. And please, if you hear nothing else in the podcast, please hear this. The problem isn't the misapplication of the lie, although throughout history that's been really bad. I get it. The problem isn't the misapplication of the lie. The problem is the lie. And that's why it's feeling so awkward, because I don't think the answer is equality or equity. I think the answer is that there is no race. There's no race. What is fair? What is equitable? How do we make it so that we can all end at the same point? It's impossible because it's a lie. See, we're all trying to win something, and that is the human's race. That's what started from the very beginning. But there is no race. But we've created ordinates and subordinates, superiors and inferiors, the haves and the have-nots, the greaters and the lessers. This is what we're all trying to position themselves within the lie. And guess what? It's not working. And it makes sense. Ever since Cain and Abel, we have been competing in a race for superiority. That's what happens when we disconnect our identity and our worth from a loving Father who created us from the beginning. All we have is ourselves, and my goal is to make sure that I'm better than you. So we're misapplying a lie in a religious sense. We're misapplying a lie in a scientific sense. We're misapplying a lie in common sense. It's common sense. So here's the question. Can you appropriately apply a lie? Let me ask that question again. Can you appropriately apply a lie? If everything we've talked about through past human history is this misapplying a lie, can you appropriately apply a lie? And of course the answer is no. It can never be done. It just can't be done. And that's what we're seeing right now. This is the charade, the song and dance that's being attempted right now, but with no target, with no end game, with no purpose. In fact, it's making it worse. We have to end the lie. I understand justice. I understand righting the misapplications of justice. I get it. But to what end? What is the goal? The end goal is to end racism. The racism that we've created subjectively. And we see it in politics every day, that we're dividing people up into groups, into voting blocks, into segregatory areas of people, and even the politicians are unashamedly doing it. They're actually creating and perpetuating the lie. I just don't believe it's that difficult to see, but maybe it is, because we are influenced by a liar. The world has no clue how to end racism. All they're hoping is that we can all start at different areas and handicap people and give some people a headwind and some people a tailwind and remove shoes and add shoes and have some people run downhill and some people run uphill and we try to make it so that all of us cross the finish line at the same time. Not realizing that the lie is the race itself. It isn't getting better, is it? Despite all of our efforts, despite all of our awareness, despite all the NFL players wearing something on their helmet, despite people putting it on the walls in the outfield of the baseball games, no matter what we're doing, it isn't working. Even though we're drawing more attention to it, all we're doing is throwing fuel on the fire of racism. So the answer is to end the lie. Here's the truth. We're all brown-skinned. We're all from the same descendant. We're all one blood. Acts 17, 26 through 28. And he has made them from one blood, every nation of men, to dwell on all the face of the earth. That's what the Bible says. We are colorblind. It has to be the goal. But here's one thing else I want to say, and I've alluded to it throughout this podcast. We all have one common enemy. The Bible says that we actually don't battle against flesh and blood, but against principalities and powers, against the rulers of this age, against the powers of darkness that absolutely love division. When the fruit of our plan, when the fruit of the human's race is more division, guess who is the author of that? The liar, the enemy. The one who seeks to just kill, steal, and destroy everything about the human race. Because he knows the power and the good that happens when we are unified and we are one in him, in the Father. It's all part of his plan. And that maybe is the greatest evidence of all this point that there is no race. Maybe that's the greatest evidence because the fruit of even talking about and discussing race and trying to bring equality or equity, the fruit has been greater division. Whose job description is that? It's the liar. It's the one who brings division. So what do? We propagate truth like this podcast. Tell people what I just told you today. Just tell them simply. Science doesn't show it. The Bible doesn't show it. Why do you think there's races? Ask questions, open-ended questions. Who told you there were races and what does that look like? How do you respond to the fact that genetically somebody from Norway can have as much in common, can have more in common with a Chinese man than the Chinese neighbor in China? How do you explain that? Have them try to explain that. We're all one race. How levels of melanin in our skin determine how much money I get for college. It's perpetuating a lie. It's misapplying a lie. So what do? We refuse to race. We refuse to race. We expose the problem as the race itself. And we align ourselves with the Father's heart and how he created us to be. Maybe this is pie in the sky. Maybe this is too ivory tower-ish. Maybe this is so far gone that this can never be brought back. Well, if that's true, then I probably should be done with this podcast because I believe in my whole heart that we are the ones that set the culture. And we actually have truth on our side. We even have science on our side, which we always do. So I believe that we can bring this to the world with a large dose of sanity and understanding and compassion and justice, because those are hallmarks of his kingdom, and we are his ambassadors. Hopefully this podcast inspired you. I encourage you to go to pushbackculture.org, pushbackculture.org. Leave me some comments and questions, future topics for season number 5, which is just right around the corner. I'd be happy to entertain those. And I would love to hear feedback, questions, or even disagreements that you might have about this podcast and others. So let's go together now to set and shape the culture.